A black teenager walks into his new school cafeteria, his tray barely in hand, when a white student steps forward and dumps an entire soda over his head, laughing as the room erupts. No one helps. The staff watches in silence, and when the principal arrives, he asks what the boy did to provoke it. But what no one knew, the victim's father was a civil rights attorney, and he left behind a flash drive that could destroy the entire school board. What's on that drive? And why have they been trying to erase his name for years? Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. Naima Carter stood at the edge of Westbridge Academy's massive stone steps, gripping the strap of her backpack so tight her fingers trembled. The school was nothing like what she was used to. It loomed tall, old, and cold, with ivy trailing its brick walls like the arms of something alive. Her heart pounded against her chest like it was trying to escape. She had counted the days until she could transfer out of her old public school in South Atlanta. But now, standing here, surrounded by spotless uniforms, murmured greetings, and stares that lingered a second too long, she wasn't sure she belonged anywhere. Naima wasn't new to being the only one. Only black girl in honors English. Only one who wore her natural curls loose on picture day. Only one who couldn't laugh when the teacher accidentally called her by the name of another black student. But this was different. This wasn't just being unseen. This felt like a setup. She took one careful step into the hallway, eyes scanning the crowd. Westbridge buzzed with the kind of privilege that didn't need to announce itself. Blonde ponytails bobbed past her. Laughter sounded sharp, coded, and too casual. Boys wore pressed khakis and girls carried tote bags that probably cost more than her mom's monthly paycheck. She kept her eyes forward, pretending not to notice how conversations paused when she walked by.
Yo, who let that in?
Someone muttered. She didn't turn. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. Head up. Don't shrink for anybody. She found her locker. Number 11, a top locker just above eye level, making it harder for her to reach without standing on tiptoe. She spun the dial twice, then again, it wouldn't open. A sharp snicker behind her. Looks like even the lockers know she doesn't belong. Naima turned her head slowly. A boy stood there, smug, holding a venti iced coffee in his left hand like a prop. His name was Braden Tucker. She'd overheard someone whisper it earlier. Senior, lacrosse captain, son of someone important. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. His presence was a smirk all on its own. Need help transfer? He asked, stepping closer. Naima said nothing. Just looked at him, unblinking. Braden's smile cracked wider, but it didn't reach his eyes. Then, in one smooth motion, he tilted the coffee in his hand and splashed it forward. Naima gasped. The liquid hit her chest, soaking her gray polo and dripping down to her pleated skirt. Cold, sticky, the smell of caramel syrup clinging to her skin. It ran into the creases of her elbows, her hands clenched. The hallway went silent. A dozen students saw it, maybe more, but no one moved. Braden took a step back, still holding the empty cup. He didn't laugh. That was the worst part. He just looked at her like she was a problem he had just erased. Naima didn't move. She stared at the coffee spreading across her shirt. Then she slowly raised her eyes to meet his. For a split second, something in Braden's face twitched, like he saw something in her he hadn't expected. But it passed. From behind the crowd, a voice cut through.
Hey, back up.
Everyone turned. A girl pushed her way through the circle. Short, stocky, dark-skinned, with tight braids and eyes that didn't flinch. She looked at Naima, then at Braden. You think that's funny? She snapped. Braden gave her a look of disdain. Mind your business. The girl stepped between him and Naima. She is my business. Naima stared at the girl, confused. She didn't know her, but the girl's stance said she didn't need to. Come on, the girl said to Naima, softer now. Let's get you cleaned up. Still frozen, Naima followed. The girl led her into the nearest bathroom, pulling paper towels from the dispenser. I'm Tish, she said. Don't talk. Just breathe. Naima took the towels, dabbing at her shirt. Her hands shook. They'll say it was an accident, Tish added. They always do. Naima swallowed hard. He didn't even flinch. Like, it was normal. Tish nodded. Here it is. You just landed on his radar. Welcome to Westbridge. Naima looked at her reflection. A wet brown stain covered her chest. It looked like a target. Why help me? She asked. Tish leaned against the sink. Because I know what it feels like to be watched and still not seen. The bell rang. Students filtered past the bathroom, whispering. Naima stepped back into the hallway, her shirt still damp. The whispering stopped when she walked by. Brayden was gone, but the echo of what he did stayed. And by lunchtime Naima would learn that the school's response wouldn't be to punish Brayden, but to question her. Naima sat in the principal's office with her damp shirt still sticking to her skin, the smell of stale coffee clinging to her like a memory that refused to fade. A faint hum came from the fluorescent lights above, and the air felt too clean, too artificial. The secretary at the front desk had looked her up and down before asking her to please wait. Now Naima sat on a leather chair that creaked every time she moved, clutching her backpack against her knees like a shield. Behind the heavy oak desk sat Principal Margaret Ellison, a woman in her late 50s with a crisp navy suit, a string of pearls, and the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. She folded her hands neatly over a file folder that had Naima's name typed in bold letters across the front. "So," Ellison began, voice calm, almost rehearsed, "you're new here, correct?" "Yes, ma'am," Naima said quietly. "And this incident in the hallway," Ellison continued, tapping her pen on the desk. "Why don't you tell me what happened in your own words?" Naima blinked, startled by the phrasing. "He threw coffee on me." Ellison nodded slowly, as though processing a math problem. "Right. And did you say or do something that might have upset him before that?" Naima looked up. "What?" "I'm just trying to get a full picture," Ellison said, tone smooth but sharp. "Sometimes misunderstandings happen between students. You're new. He's popular. Maybe he misread something you said, or did." Naima felt her chest tighten. "I didn't say anything. I was opening my locker." Ellison gave a sympathetic nod that felt anything but genuine. Brayden's never had any disciplinary issues before. His father's been a generous supporter of the school for years. I'm sure you understand that we need to handle these things carefully." Naima's hands trembled. "He threw coffee on me. In front of everyone. And I'm not excusing that," Ellison said quickly, "but we also have to make sure there's no," she hesitated, lowering her voice, "cultural misunderstanding at play. Sometimes students from different backgrounds perceive teasing differently." Naima stared at her. "That wasn't teasing." Silence stretched thin across the room. From the corner, Assistant Principal Dorsey, a younger man in a gray suit who hadn't said a word, finally cleared his throat. "There is some video evidence, but it's, hard to make out. Looks like the cup slipped. No sound, just movement." Naima turned to him sharply. "It didn't slip. He looked right at me before he did it." Ellison interjected. "Brayden mentioned he felt you were standing too close to him, said he turned too fast, and the drink spilled by mistake." Naima felt her throat close up. Every word out of their mouths twisted the truth, until it bent into something unrecognizable. "So what happens now?" she asked, her voice small but steady. Ellison smiled politely. "We'll call both sets of parents. For now I think it's best you go home for the day, just until things calm down. We don't want any more attention drawn to this." Naima's jaw dropped. "You're sending me home?" "It's not punishment," Ellison assured, her tone patronizingly soft. "It's just preventive. We want to ensure a safe environment for everyone." Naima's breath came shallow. Safe for everyone, except her. When she stepped outside the office, the hallway had emptied. A few teachers passed by, pretending not to look at her shirt. Her reflection in the glass trophy case caught her attention. Wrinkled uniform, dried coffee stains across her chest, eyes dull with disbelief. Behind her reflection gleamed rows of plaques with names like Tucker, Bennett, Graves. Families who built this school. Families like Brayden. By the time Naima reached the front steps, her mother's car was already waiting. A silver sedan that had seen better years. Her mother, Naima Carter, stepped out before Naima even reached the curb. The sight of her mother, strong, tall, her expression fierce, even in confusion, almost broke Naima's composure. "What happened?" Renee demanded, scanning her daughter's shirt. Naima's lips trembled. "He threw coffee on me, Mom. Everyone saw it." Renee's jaw tightened. "Who?" "A senior, Brayden Tucker." Renee froze. "Tucker?" she repeated, like the name itself was a warning. Naima nodded. "They called me into the office. The principal asked what I did to make him do it." For a moment Renee said nothing. Her face hardened in a way Naima had never seen before, like something deep inside her snapped back into place. She took a slow breath and looked toward the school doors. Get in the car, she said quietly. Mom! Now. Naima. Obeyed. Renee marched back inside. The secretary looked up, startled, as Renee's heels struck the tile with military precision. I need to see Principal Ellison, she said, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. The secretary hesitated. Do you have an appointment? Renee's eyes cut through her. Now. Moments later, the office door swung open again. Principal Ellison looked surprised, then vaguely annoyed. Mrs. Carter, yes, I was going to call you. You called my daughter a liar, Renee interrupted. In what world does that make sense to you? Ellison blinked, maintaining her composure. I didn't call her a liar, Mrs. Carter. I'm simply saying. You're saying her word isn't enough, Renee shot back. Because your student, your legacy boy, has a clean record and a rich father. Ellison's expression faltered slightly. I think we're getting off track. Our goal here is to de-escalate. De-escalate? Renee repeated, incredulous. A white boy humiliated my daughter in front of half the school, and you want to talk about de-escalation? Please, lower your voice. No, Renee said, steady and unflinching. I will not lower my voice when my daughter's dignity is treated like it's optional. Assistant Principal Dorsey stepped forward, hands raised. We understand your frustration. You understand nothing. Renee turned back to Ellison. You think this is new to me? You think I haven't sat in rooms just like this before listening to people like you talk about misunderstandings and context? Ellison frowned. Mrs. Carter. Renee's eyes blazed. Let me tell you something about context. I marched with my father in a town that didn't want us to exist. He taught me what silence buys. It buys permission for people like your Braden Tucker to believe they're untouchable. So no, I'm not staying silent. You can either suspend him, or I'll make sure everyone in this county knows what you allowed to happen here. The room went quiet. Even Dorsey shifted uncomfortably. Ellison finally spoke, her voice measured. We'll review the incident, Mrs. Carter. Please understand we can't act rashly based on emotion. Renee leaned in, across the desk. Emotion is what happens when your child is humiliated, and then blamed for it. Don't confuse that with weakness. Without another word, she turned and left. Naima watched her mother emerge from the building, face unreadable. They drove home in silence for several minutes before Renee finally spoke. Naima, she said quietly, you need to understand something about families like the Tuckers. They don't lose. Not easily. They own half the town, but they've crossed the wrong mother today. Naima looked at her, hesitant. What do you mean? Renee kept her eyes on the road. Let's just say this isn't the first time I've had to deal with them. And last time, it didn't end well for them. Naima turned toward her mother, stunned. Mom, what do you mean last time? Renee exhaled slowly, her jaw set. You'll find out soon enough. What Naima didn't know, what no one at Westbridge knew, was that Renee Carter's name was already buried in the Tucker family's history, tied to a scandal the school had worked hard to forget. The next morning, Westbridge Academy looked exactly the same. Clean-cut, quiet, and cruel in its perfection. But for Naima, the building might as well have been a crime scene. Every hallway, every glance carried residue from yesterday's humiliation. The coffee had dried, but the memory was fresh, sticky, and unshakable. She'd barely slept. Her mother had stayed up pacing the living room, calling relatives, then old contacts Naima had never heard of. At one point, Naima had heard her mother whisper into the phone, if his father's still on that board, I want everything on record. She didn't know what that meant, only that it sounded like a threat wrapped in history. When she walked back into school, the silence hit her again. Conversations hushed as she passed. A few kids snickered. Others looked away, pretending not to notice. Tish walked beside her, jaw tight. They posted it, Tish whispered under her breath. Naima stopped. Posted what? The video. Someone filmed it. The coffee thing. It's already online, but don't get your hopes up. The school's trying to get it taken down. Naima's stomach flipped. Wait, what? How did they? Tish shook her head. Doesn't matter who. Just know Braden's been bragging all morning that it's fake. Says it was edited. Edited? Naima's voice cracked. How do you edit coffee hitting someone's chest? Simple, Tish said, bitterly. You're black. He's white. The story edits itself. Naima's heart thudded painfully in her chest. Does everyone think I lied? Tish sighed. Everyone who matters here already decided that. They reached their lockers. A folded note stuck out from Naima's lock. No name. Just one sentence in black ink. Should have known your kind doesn't last here. Naima froze. The letters were carved deep, as if the writer wanted them to cut through the paper and into her skin. Tish saw it, ripped the note off, crumpled it, and threw it away. Don't give them that power. But Naima couldn't move. Her mind looped through the same phrase again and again. Your kind. She'd heard it before in 1,000 subtle ways. But written down like that, it felt like a verdict. Inside Principal Ellison's office, things were moving faster than anyone knew. Ellison sat across from Braden Tucker and his father, Charles Tucker, who radiated quiet menace. A man used to getting his way without raising his voice. His gray suit was pressed to perfection, his tie a muted red silk. He was one of those people who didn't need to announce his power. It was understood. He had money, influence, and the confidence of a man who had never been told no for long. I'm just saying, Margaret, Charles said calmly, leaning back in his chair. We don't want this situation to become something it's not. Kids will be kids. I've seen the video. It's clearly an accident. Ellison nodded slowly, uncomfortable. Of course, Mr. Tucker. We're taking every step to de-escalate. Charles smiled faintly. De-escalate. Good word. Because if this turns into a racial controversy, that reflects poorly on the school and on the board. You understand what's at stake. Ellison did. She'd been principal long enough to know which students were untouchable. The Tuckers funded the new library wing, the athletic complex, half the scholarships the school bragged about in their annual report. If Charles Tucker said something wasn't racism, it wasn't, at least not on paper. Still, something in her stomach twisted. Mr. Tucker, I assure you we're handling this carefully. But the girl's mother, Mrs. Carter, is rather vocal. She's already threatened legal action. Charles chuckled quietly. Renee Carter. I remember that name. Ellison looked up. You do? Oh yes, he said, almost with amusement. She used to work in the county office years ago. Caused quite a stir, if I recall. Always thought the rules didn't apply to her. He adjusted his cufflinks, his tone dropping to something colder. I'd suggest you remind her that Westbridge doesn't tolerate false claims. She's playing with the wrong family this time. Braden sat silently beside his father, smirking. His hand bounced on his knee, not out of guilt, but impatience. He looked like someone who'd already won. When the meeting ended, Charles gave Ellison a firm handshake and said, Do the right thing, Margaret, for everyone's sake. The door closed behind them, leaving Ellison alone in the silence. Outside, Braden strutted down the hall, whispers following him. One of his teammates clapped him on the shoulder. Dude, that video's blowing up. You're famous. Braden grinned. Yeah, well, fame has a price. Your dad's handling it, right? Please. Braden scoffed. He practically runs this school. Meanwhile, in a small computer lab near the back of the building, Naima sat beside Tish scrolling through her phone. The video was everywhere, reposted on multiple platforms under hashtags she couldn't bear to read. Locker drama, fake racism, attention seeker. Each view counter ticked upward like a heartbeat. The clip showed Braden standing by the lockers, coffee in hand. The moment froze just before the spill, then jumped. The splash wasn't visible, only Naima gasping afterward. Someone had trimmed the video to make it look like an overreaction. See? Tish said bitterly. They cut out the part that mattered. Someone's covering for him. Naima's throat burned. Can we upload the full one? I don't have it. Whoever took this first had the full clip. Naima's mind raced. There was a girl filming from the other side, near the trophy case. Tish frowned. You sure? Yes. I saw her reflection in the glass. Then find her, Tish said, standing. Because right now they're rewriting your story. By lunch, the whispers had turned to outright comments. She made it up for attention. She's playing the race card. Bet she spills stuff on herself all the time. Naima walked through the cafeteria line, pretending not to hear, but every word burrowed deeper. She sat at an empty table near the back, head down. A tray slammed beside her. It was Braden. He leaned against the seat across from her, grin sharp and lazy. You know, he said, voice casual, my dad says you should be careful throwing around accusations. Defamation's a serious thing. Naima's stomach dropped. You assaulted me. He shrugged. Accidents happen. You looked right at me before you did it. He tilted his head. That's your interpretation. Naima's hands balled into fists. You think you can just... He leaned in closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. This school runs on legacy, Carter, not pity. You don't belong here. You're just a diversity brochure that got printed by mistake. Her eyes burned, but she refused to let tears fall in front of him. Braden stood up, satisfied. "Enjoy your lunch," he said, tossing his half-eaten apple onto her tray. Tish appeared a moment later, breathless. "Naima. He's trending again. People are using his name to boost their pages. The school still hasn't taken a stance." Naima stared down at the apple rolling slowly across her tray. Of course they haven't. Later that afternoon, Principal Ellison held an emergency staff meeting. Teachers filled the conference room, whispering. "Shouldn't we support the girl?" one asked quietly. "Be careful," another warned. "You know how these things go. The board will protect the Tuckers." Ellison cleared her throat, bringing the room to order. "I've spoken with Mr. Tucker personally. For now, we'll treat this as a misunderstanding. Please advise students not to share or comment on social media." A teacher raised his hand timidly. "But the video, we don't know its authenticity," Ellison snapped. "Our priority is to avoid unnecessary controversy. The last thing we need is a racial scandal." From the back, a younger teacher muttered, "Maybe the last thing we need is silence." Ellison's eyes cut toward him, but she said nothing. By evening, the story had leaked beyond Westbridge. Local blogs picked it up first. Private school student claims racial harassment. Officials say misunderstanding. The comment section was brutal. Half called Naima brave. The other half called her manipulative. Naima Carter read every word, jaw tightening with each line. She sat at the kitchen table with her laptop, notes spread around her, old documents, names, articles. A faint headline from 10 years earlier. County records clerk fired amid discrimination complaint. The photo showed a younger Renee, defiant, determined, holding a stack of papers, and next to her, in a smaller inset, was a familiar last name, Tucker. Naima came downstairs quietly. "Mom, what are you doing?" Renee closed the laptop halfway, making sure history doesn't repeat itself. Naima frowned. "What do you mean?" Renee looked at her daughter, eyes filled with the kind of weariness that comes from fighting too many unseen wars. "When I worked for the county, Charles Tucker was a councilman. He tried to block minority housing permits. I called him out in a report. Next thing I knew, I was fired for insubordination." Naima's breath caught. "You think he remembers you?" "Oh, he remembers," Renee said coldly. "Men like him never forget the people who stood in their way, especially when those people look like us." The next morning, the first real crack appeared in the Tuckers' control. A new video surfaced online, unedited this time. The full clip, Braden, smirking, making a joke to his friend before turning and deliberately throwing his coffee at Naima. The laughter, the silence afterward. Everything. Within hours, it went viral. The comments flipped. Now people were outraged. Expel him. Protect Naima Carter. This is what privilege looks like. The school's inbox flooded. Reporters began calling. Principal Ellison stared at her screen, horrified. Charles Tucker's number lit up her phone before she could even think. "Margaret." His voice hissed. "You said this was handled." I don't know how the full video got out," she stammered. "We're investigating." "Find out who leaked it," he snapped. "And silence it before this becomes something bigger." But it was already too late. Naima sat on her bed that night, scrolling through hundreds of notifications. Messages from strangers. Support, hate, sympathy, rage. It all blurred together, until she couldn't tell which comments hurt, and which helped. Tish texted her a link. "You're trending on Twitter." Naima stared at the screen. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. But the attention didn't feel like justice. It felt like exposure, like standing under a spotlight she never asked for. Her phone buzzed again. A private message from an unknown account. "They won't forgive you for this. Be careful." Naima's hands went cold. She looked toward the window, half expecting someone to be there. She turned to her mother's closed bedroom door. "Mom?" she whispered. No answer. Naima sat in the dark, her reflection faint in the glass. The girl they tried to erase, now seen by millions. But somewhere in a boardroom or a back office, the Tuckers were planning their next move. The full video was out, and the internet was starting to notice. But with every view, a new danger was brewing. Because the Tuckers weren't just angry, they were powerful. And power at Westbridge always came with a price. The full video had gone viral, and Naima Carter's name was now known far beyond the walls of Westbridge Academy. National hashtags, think pieces, and Instagram reels burst onto the scene in waves. Each post dissecting what happened, what it meant, and what people believed it said about America. But in the hallways of Westbridge, none of that changed her reality. Here inside the cream-colored walls, lined with donor plaques and Ivy League college banners, Naima was still alone. Still the girl with the coffee-stained shirt. Still the new girl. Still the black girl. And now she was something worse. She was controversial. There was no mob at her locker. No administrators rushing to check in on her mental health. Just silence. Loaded, humming silence that spoke volumes through the way people stepped aside as she walked, or didn't make eye contact, or whispered just loud enough for her to hear. She's just making everything about race. Her mom's probably coaching her. Some people just can't handle private school. The words didn't need to be shouted to do damage. They floated through the air like pollen, invisible, until the reaction hit. And in Naima's case, the reaction was allergic and suffocating. Even before the coffee, she had felt it. The kind of subtle rejection that doesn't break rules but breaks spirit. Like when a teacher never remembered her name, even after 4 weeks. Or when her partner in Spanish class asked to switch because he needed someone who was actually focused. Or when the counselor questioned if honors English might be too much pressure for someone who just transferred. Now, it had escalated. In chemistry, a boy she had been assigned to sit next to shifted his stool noticeably further away, pulling his books to the edge of the table. In gym, no one would pair with her during warm-ups. And during lunch, she heard it, the unmistakable tone of ridicule, just a table away. Do you think she even washes that hair? Probably with motor oil. The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to draw blood. Naima didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She simply folded her tray back onto her lunch and stood up, the plastic scraping across the table sounding louder than it should. Every movement she made now felt watched and judged. But it wasn't just students. That was the part that made it worse. Her English teacher, Mr. Hollenbeck, a white man who wore Malcolm X quotes on his walls and called himself an ally, suddenly began calling on her every time race came up in class. During a reading of To Kill a Mockingbird, he paused and said, "Naima, how does this passage reflect your cultural experience?" The class turned to look at her like she was a spokesperson for all things black. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the desk. But instead, she simply said, "It reflects injustice," and stared back at him. "Would you care to expand on that?" he prodded, smiling. "No," she said plainly. His smile faded, and he moved on. But the message was clear. You are only here when it's time to be the race representative. The token. The talking point. In AP History, she turned in a well-researched essay on civil rights litigation and landmark cases. The grade? B-. The comment? Good effort, but try not to make everything about race. Her locker was vandalized a second time, not with a drink this time, but with a Sharpie, in thick black ink across the metal. A hairbrush was taped to the handle with a note. "Try this." Naima stood staring at it for several seconds before calmly removing the brush and tossing it in the trash. She didn't report it. What was the point? The first time she reported the coffee incident, they sent her home. Tish was livid. "You have to say something," she snapped. "They don't get to erase you like this." Naima just shook her head. "They already have. They think you deserve it now. Like you asked for this." She was right. The narrative had flipped. Overnight, Naima had gone from victim to instigator in the eyes of the school. Because that's how racism survives, not always with slurs and violence, but with whispers, rewrites, and the quiet shifting of blame. Her inbox filled with hate, anonymous messages from fake accounts, DMs that said things like, "Go back to where you came from," or "Westbridge isn't a ghetto outreach program." A fake Instagram account appeared using her photo distorted with filters, racist captions, and mocking videos. One post read, "Naima Carter, victim of too much attention." She tried to ignore it, to breathe, to walk past the murmurs. But each day chipped a little more off her confidence. The school, of course, said nothing. No assembly, no official statement, no counseling, no consequences. Just silence. One afternoon, Naima was sitting in the library, headphones in but no music playing. She was trying to study for a math quiz, but her hands wouldn't stop trembling. Her pencil shook across the page as she tried to graph an equation. A group of girls walked by. She didn't look up, but she heard them. One leaned in and said, just loudly enough, "Is that her real hair?" They weren't angry. They weren't cruel. They were curious. The kind of curiosity that turns people into specimens. The kind that strips away humanity. Naima stood. Quietly, methodically, she packed her books, closed her laptop, and walked out. She didn't stop at the front desk, didn't check out. Her feet led her past the classrooms, the student lounge, the lockers, and out to the far side of campus, toward the old gym. The gym had been closed for months, due to renovations, but the side door, if you pulled, then shoved, still open. She stepped inside. The air was thick with dust and memory. Dim sunlight filtered through the high windows, casting soft shadows across the wooden floor. The walls still had peeling paint and faded banners from decades-old championships. In the far corner, the mats were still rolled up, abandoned. Naima sat down and closed her eyes. Then she began to stretch. Slowly, deliberately. Her breath came steady, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Her father had taught her this. Before the pain, before the funeral, before he was taken from her by a mistake the state still hadn't apologized for. Breathing is your anchor, he used to say. Control your breath, and you control the moment. She let the rhythm of her breathing take over. And then she moved, kata by kata, form by form. Not punches, not just flow. Precision, memory, grounding. Each motion pulled her back to herself. In that dusty gym, she wasn't the viral victim. She wasn't the transfer kid. She wasn't the black girl being dissected and dismissed. She was his daughter. Strong, silent, balanced. She let her arms cut through the air like blades. Her legs bend and root like trees. Her body remembered what her mind tried to forget. She had power. She had presence. And she didn't owe anyone an explanation. The mat squeaked behind her. Naima froze. Someone else was in the gym. Her heart spiked. Slowly, she turned her head. A shadow moved from behind the bleachers. Tall, deliberate, wearing a jacket with the school's crest. It wasn't a student. When the figure stepped into the light, Naima's breath caught. It was a man, maybe late 40s, broad shoulders, faint limp, sharp eyes. She didn't recognize him, but there was something familiar in his face. Something that made her take a half step back without meaning to. He raised his hands slightly. Didn't mean to scare you, he said. Just came to check the old floorboards. Didn't expect anyone in here. Naima didn't speak. The man tilted his head. That form, your stance. Shotokan. Her eyes widened slightly. He nodded. Thought so. That pivot on the third kata is textbook. She swallowed hard. You know karate? Used to. He smiled faintly. Your dad used to help me teach Saturday classes at the rec center. Back before. He paused. Before everything. Naima's throat tightened. You knew him? Quincy Carter? He said, as if saying the name pulled something ancient into the room. Knew him better than most. He saved my life once. She didn't move. He took a slow step forward. I was there the day they came for him. When that officer pulled the trigger over a license plate error. I remember the sound. I remember the silence after it too. Naima's hands trembled. He kept his voice low. I couldn't stop it. I wanted to. I froze, and I've hated myself every day since. A long silence settled between them. Then he said, My name's Marcus. I do maintenance here now. But back then, I was someone. Naima's voice was barely above a whisper. Why are you telling me this? Because I saw what they did to you. I saw the video. And I know that silence kills. He paused. Your father never let injustice go unchallenged. And I see that same fire in you. I see it in how you move. You haven't lost it. They're trying to drown it, but it's still there. Naima looked down, blinking away tears. You don't have to fight alone, he added. Not this time. She looked up. Why now? Why me? Because this school has a history, Marcus said. One they buried. One your father tried to expose before they buried him too. Her chest tightened. What history? Marcus glanced around. Meet me after school tomorrow. I'll show you something. Naima stood frozen as Marcus slipped out of the gym, leaving behind more questions than answers. What history did her father die trying to reveal? And what secrets still haunted the halls of Westbridge, waiting to be uncovered? Naima Carter had trained for years to master stillness. Not just the kind that meant silence, but the kind that meant control. Stillness under pressure. Stillness under insult. Stillness while your body screamed to respond. Her father used to say, real strength isn't in your fists, it's in the decision not to use them. But inside the echoing halls of Westbridge Academy, strength started to feel like surrender. Ever since the full video went viral, Braden Tucker's smirk hadn't left his face. He moved through campus like a prince untouched by scandal. His white polo shirts and designer loafers spotless. His gaze smug and confident. It didn't matter that everyone saw what he'd done. It didn't matter that Twitter had called for his expulsion, or that local parents were starting to whisper. The only thing that mattered was that Braden knew the rules didn't apply to him. He didn't touch her again. Not physically. He didn't need to. His presence was its own weapon. In the cafeteria, he chose the table directly behind her. In class, he switched his seat to sit beside her. In the hallway, he stood inches too close, letting his laughter slice through her focus like a blade. Once he whispered behind her during a fire drill, "Bet you're used to chaos." Another time, he muttered, "Careful, Carter. People like you tend to overreact." Naima had learned to breathe through her anger, to feel the heat rise, then let it dissolve. She pressed her tongue to the roof of her mouth, inhaled through her nose, and waited for the moment to pass. But it was getting harder. Every step she took was a test. Every smile from a teacher who refused to intervene felt like betrayal. Every whisper that started when she entered a room felt like erosion. And then there was the locker incident. It was small, petty, but deliberate. She'd opened her locker to find every single book soaked, drenched in what smelled like mop water. The pages sagged. Her notes bled ink. A sheet of paper taped to the inside wall read, "Guess you missed a spot." She stood there, books dripping, while students passed by and pretended not to see. Only Tish stopped. "Again?" she said, her face stormy. "This is war." Naima didn't respond. She reached in, pulled out her soaked algebra notebook, and tossed it in the trash. Tish followed her down the hallway. "You know you could drop him, right? Like drop. You've got that black belt tucked under all that patience." Naima exhaled slowly. "And what would that prove?" Tish stopped. "That he can't keep pushing you without consequences. That I'm exactly what they want me to be," Naima said sharply, turning. "Angry, uncontrolled, dangerous." Tish stepped back, eyes softening. "That's not what I meant." "I know," Naima said, voice low, "but that's what they'll say." She knew how the story would spin. The moment she raised a hand, she wouldn't be the girl who had coffee thrown on her. She'd be the girl who snapped, who couldn't control herself. The aggressive black girl. Her father had warned her, "Never give them the reaction they're fishing for, because they'll use it to hang you with your own rope." And so she didn't. She held her breath, bit her tongue, let the pressure build, until Thursday. It was the first day she tried to feel normal again. She wore a fresh white polo, tightened her backpack straps, reviewed for her bio quiz while walking to class. Then she turned the corner, and there he was. Braden, leaning casually against the wall near her locker, phone in hand, pretending not to notice her, but she could feel it coming. The game. The push. She walked past him, focused. As she reached her locker, she felt it. The hard shove against her back. Not a punch, just a nudge. Enough to knock her off balance. Her books flew. They hit the ground with a loud smack. Papers scattered like leaves. The hallway froze. Students looked, then quickly looked away. Braden smirked. "Oops." Naima turned slowly, her fists clenched, not from rage, but restraint. She looked at him, into him. "You should pick that up," he said, motioning to her books. "I think that's what you people do. Clean up messes." A teacher walked by, saw the scene, kept walking. Naima stared down at her hands. 6 seconds. That's how long it would take. A pivot, a grip, a twist, one move, and Braden would be on the floor, screaming.
But what would that prove?
She bent down and picked up her books, quietly, one by one. She didn't look at him, but someone else did. Across the hallway, tucked behind a column, a student had filmed the entire exchange, quiet, discreet, but with a full, unobstructed view. As Naima walked away, the camera kept rolling. That night, the video hit social media. No sound, just the visual. Braden's shove, the papers flying, his lips moving, the teacher walking away. It wasn't dramatic, but it was real. And real was powerful. Within hours, the video was everywhere. This time, the narrative didn't wait to spin. Students began to comment. Even those who had stayed quiet before. "That's not the first time he's done stuff like that. She just picked up her stuff. Like, how much more proof do you need?" If she had hit him back, they'd have expelled her. But look at him. Nothing. More videos surfaced. Past clips. Comments he'd made in class. Screenshots from student group chats, including ones mocking Naima's hair, her skin, her voice. A storm was coming. But Naima didn't know it yet. She sat at home, staring at her ceiling, thinking about the moment she could have ended it all, with one move. 6 seconds. She imagined her father's voice. Your strength is in knowing when to walk away. Not because you're weak, but because they need you to be angry to win. Her phone buzzed. It was Tish. A message. Girl, you need to see what just dropped. Naima opened the video link and froze. It wasn't just Braden in the footage. It was the teacher walking away and mouthing something caught on camera. Something that no one had noticed before. Something that would change everything. By morning, the new video had cracked the thin wall the school had built around Braden Tucker's reputation. The clip showed it all. Braden's casual shove. Naima's books scattering across the floor. His smirk as she bent to pick them up. And in the background, unmistakably, the teacher walking by, eyes glancing at the scene, then mouthing something clearly as he passed. The words were deciphered quickly by social media. She'll make a scene if I step in. Screenshots circled the internet like wildfire. She'll make a scene? She just got shoved. That teacher needs to be held accountable too. When black girls stay calm, they're ignored. When they speak up, they're punished. Within hours, injustice for Naima trended again. Not just in her city, but nationally. Influencers posted reaction videos. Activists posted breakdowns. Even a few celebrities retweeted the clip with captions like, "This is what racism looks like in elite schools." But inside Westbridge's front office, a very different conversation was happening. Principal Ellison looked exhausted, her usual crisp appearance unraveling slightly. Hair flatter, blazer wrinkled, voice thinner, she stood in front of a team of administrators and faculty members in an emergency meeting. "We need to reframe this immediately," she said, her tone clipped. "This isn't about race. It's about a misunderstanding between students. And it's being blown out of proportion by people who don't know the full context." Assistant Principal Dorsey, uncomfortable but complicit, nodded. "The narrative is getting away from us." Charles Tucker had already called twice that morning. "Fix it," he said each time, "or I will." The school's PR consultant, brought in the previous night, offered a pre-written statement. It read, "Westbridge Academy is committed to a safe and inclusive environment. The recent hallway incident is under review. Preliminary findings suggest a misunderstanding between two students. We ask for privacy and patience as we resolve this matter fairly for all involved." Fairly. That word tasted like bleach. Naima read the statement on her phone between second and third period. Tish sat beside her, both of them in stunned silence. "A misunderstanding?" Tish whispered. "A misunderstanding?" Naima didn't speak. She couldn't. Her hands were shaking too hard. It wasn't just what the school said, it was what it meant. It meant they were willing to gaslight her again, despite evidence, despite the world watching. It meant they were more afraid of backlash from Braden's father than they were committed to justice. That afternoon, the student body received an email titled, "Let's Reconnect as a Community." It invited students to attend a school-wide unity circle during the next assembly, where any feelings, concerns, or experiences could be safely shared in a guided, non-judgmental space. Tish slammed her locker shut. "They're doing a damn trust circle instead of firing people?" Naima folded the email into her binder. "I'm not going," she said quietly. But as she walked through the hall that day, she could feel a shift. Some students looked at her differently now. Not with pity, but with recognition. A few even offered quiet nods. A girl from her AP history class slipped her a note that simply said, "You're not crazy. I've seen it too." Even so, others still refused to believe what they saw. She edited it. He barely touched her. This is cancel culture. The day dragged. Whispers crawled across classroom walls. Screens lit up under desks. Rumors spread fast. Naima kept her head high. But inside, something was cracking. She found herself eating lunch in the empty library. Even Tish had been pulled into a meeting about online behavior guidelines, which of course focused on students escalating drama by recording peers. At 3:12 p.m., her phone buzzed. No contact, no name, just a number. A message. "You're not safe here." Naima froze. She looked around the quiet shelves. The librarian was talking to someone at the front desk. A few students clicked away on Chromebooks. No one seemed to be looking her way. Her heart pounded in her ears. She opened the message again. There were no emojis, no typos, just those 4 words. She clicked on the sender's number. Blocked. She took a screenshot, sent it to her mom. Then she did something she hadn't done all week. She went to the front office. Principal Ellison looked up, clearly annoyed. Naima, I'm in the middle of... I got a threat, Naima said, holding out her phone. Ellison took it, glanced at the screen, then sighed. We'll look into it. But these kinds of things are usually just students being dramatic. Naima stared. A threat isn't dramatic. We don't want to jump to conclusions, Ellison said. Teenagers send anonymous messages all the time. It could be anyone. Exactly, Naima replied. And until you figure out who, I'm not safe here. Ellison didn't answer. Naima left the office feeling colder than when she'd entered. That night, Renee Carter sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand, rage vibrating in her fingertips. They think this ends with statements and circles, she said to Naima. They think they can gaslight an entire community. What do we do? Naima asked quietly. Renee opened her laptop. Now we push back. And we don't stop until the system that protects boys like Braden breaks open. Naima watched as her mother typed a new email, not to the school, but to a list of contacts Naima didn't recognize. Journalists, lawyers, activists, the kind of people who didn't flinch. Naima's hands trembled again, but this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from something else, something her father used to call righteous fire. She looked down at her phone again. Another message had arrived. This one wasn't anonymous. It read, I have footage, real footage. Meet me tomorrow after school. Naima stared at the message, her pulse racing. Whoever this was had more than just a text. They had proof, and if it was what she thought it was, it could unravel everything. Elijah Reyes had always been quiet, not shy, observant, watching when others missed things, listening when rooms filled with noise. He wasn't invisible, but he wasn't memorable either, and that was his advantage. People forgot he was there, which meant they said things they wouldn't have otherwise. That's how he found the group chat. It started with a school laptop. He'd borrowed it to finish backing up the locker room footage, double-checking files before handing them off. He wasn't trying to snoop, but when a notification pinged in the corner of the screen, staff lounge, private messenger, something about it made him freeze. It wasn't a student app. It was internal. The message preview said, this girl is a walking lawsuit. Should have never accepted her. He clicked, slowly. What opened wasn't just unprofessional. It was rotten. A private group chat, active for weeks. 10 teachers, most of them white. Some using full names, others initials, but their comments were unmistakable. Sharp, cruel, and worse, casual. Elijah scrolled. They were mocking Naima. What's up with the microphone on her head today? She always sounds like she's auditioning for BET. Affirmative action at its finest. She's got a chip on her shoulder the size of Atlanta. Some included photos from class Zoom sessions. Screenshots of Naima mid-sentence, captioned with memes. One showed her face edited onto a stock photo of an angry black woman yelling, with the text, when your essay about struggle doesn't get an A. It wasn't just Naima either. Other students of color appeared in the thread, mocked for their names, their accents, their family backgrounds. One teacher joked about setting the curve lower this year, because you know who's in the room now. Elijah kept scrolling, and then he saw it. A message from a teacher he recognized. Miss Daly from the AP History department. Keep her out of AP History. It'll make our numbers look better. Another replied. Exactly. If she asks, tell her the class is full. Elijah's stomach dropped. He hit save all, took screenshots, then recorded a screen capture video, just in case they deleted it later. He sent it to Naima that evening. Her phone buzzed. She opened the file. She scrolled once. Then again. Then again. At first she was numb. Then her hands began to shake. Her face burned. Not from shame, but fury. The kind of fury that comes when someone confirms your worst fears with receipts. She called Elijah immediately. Is this real? She whispered. Yeah, he said. And there's more. I think there's a secondary thread. I'm trying to get in now. Naima turned the screen toward her mom. Renee didn't speak. She just sat there, reading, eyes narrowing, jaw locking. The silence of a mother, realizing a system had once again tried to erase her daughter, but left fingerprints behind. They didn't sleep that night. Renee emailed their lawyer. Naima forwarded the files to two journalists she had connected with during the previous fallout. By morning, the story had taken on a life of its own. Screenshots leaked. Reporters circled. The headline that broke the dam read, "Inside the Teacher's Lounge, How Racism Festers Behind Private School Doors." The article included direct quotes. Uncensored. It laid out the power dynamics, how Naima had been excluded from academic opportunities, how teachers had colluded to suppress her potential, how her image had been distorted and mocked. By lunchtime, Westbridge Academy was on fire, not literally, but figuratively. The student body was shaken. Some were stunned. Some weren't surprised at all. "We always knew there was bias here. We just didn't know how deep it went," one student tweeted. Parents demanded an emergency town hall. Black and brown alumni posted open letters. Donors began withdrawing pledges. Outside the school, a group of parents stood with signs. "We're not an experiment. Truth is not a disruption. Silence protects no one." Inside, Principal Ellison held a hastily arranged press conference. Her eyes were puffy. Her voice was forced calm. "We are appalled by the private comments made by a small group of staff members," she said. "They do not reflect the values of Westbridge Academy. We are investigating and will take appropriate action." Reporters shouted questions. Were these teachers disciplined before? Did Naima Carter lose academic access because of these chats? Why were these conversations happening on school devices? Ellison dodged, stammered. Eventually, she walked off the podium mid-question. Naima watched the footage from home. Tish sat next to her on the couch. "You did this," she whispered. "You broke their system." But Naima didn't feel victorious. She felt cracked open, like someone had broadcast her trauma before she'd even gotten a chance to name it for herself. It wasn't just about being bullied now. It wasn't about coffee on her shirt or hallway shoves. It was deeper. They had hated her for existing, for being bright, for being vocal, for being unafraid. Her phone buzzed. Elijah. Again. Message. I got into the subchat. "Naima, it's worse than we thought." She didn't hesitate. "Send it," she replied. A file appeared minutes later. She opened it. It was a spreadsheet. An internal file titled Behavioral Trends Advanced Monitoring. It had names, GPAs, attendance, teacher notes, and race in its own column. Next to each name was a color-coded flag. Green, yellow, red. Naima's name had a red circle. Under comments, "Too smart," "Too loud," "Watch her." Other students had comments like, "Borderline defiant, possible mental health concern," "Family history unknown," "Assume unstable," "Speaks slang," "Struggling with standard communication." There were no white students on the list. Naima's eyes blurred, not from tears, from the rage building behind them. She forwarded the file to her lawyer, then to the journalists, then to the school board. There would be no peace this time. No meetings. No restorative circles. No polite framing. There would be fire. As Naima closed her laptop, a new email came through. Not from Elijah, not from a student, but from inside the administration. Subject line: "They're planning to pin this on you." The letter haunted her. Not just because of what it said. "There are things you don't know about your father, about Westbridge," but because of how it got to her. Folded neatly, tucked quietly into her locker. No handwriting, no smudges. Whoever sent it hadn't rushed. Someone had been watching her. She hadn't told anyone. Not even her mother. Not yet. The day of her scheduled interview with Simone Brooks was fast approaching, and the school had entered a quiet panic. Westbridge didn't handle exposure well. Several teachers deleted old social media posts. The head of PR began popping into classrooms. There were rumors of an emergency board meeting, and Braden Tucker hadn't been seen since Monday. But something else had shifted. Naima started noticing things. Small, unsettling things. Every day after last period, she felt like someone was following her. Not just paranoia. Real footsteps. Real presence. She always walked the same route from school to the bus stop, down the hill past the tennis courts, across the side lot, and behind the science wing to the east exit. It wasn't crowded. Most students were picked up near the front, where parents formed long lines of idling SUVs. Naima didn't want to make noise, didn't want to seem dramatic. But after 3 days of hearing footsteps behind her, footsteps that stopped when she turned around, she reported it. She stepped into the counselor's office at the end of the day. Miss Halverson glanced up from her desk. "Naima, everything okay?" I think I'm being followed, Naima said, voice calm but steady. Halverson raised her eyebrows. Naima explained. The route, the sounds, the pattern. She even mentioned the letter. I don't know if it's connected, she said. But it feels... Halverson gave a tight smile. Well, have you considered changing your route? She asked. Naima blinked. Excuse me? Just for safety. Maybe stick to the front exit? That's more populated. These things often turn out to be misunderstandings. Naima's jaw tightened. So I should change my behavior, not report the threat. I'm not saying that, Halverson said gently. I'm saying perception matters. You've been through a lot. It's possible you're just on edge. Naima stood up slowly. I'm on edge because I have reason to be. And I'm telling you this because I'm not going to wait until something happens. There was a pause. Halverson wrote something in her notepad. Of course, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I'll flag it to campus security. Naima left the office more exposed than she entered. By the next morning, whispers had begun. Students looked at her in the hallway differently, as if her name had been brought up in a meeting, then passed down like a warning. Then it got worse. During third period, Mr. Corbin, the same English teacher who once questioned her essay tone, pulled her aside. I heard you had a concern about someone following you, he said in a hushed voice.
Naima hesitated. Yeah. Why?
Corbin gave a small chuckle. Some of us are just wondering, are you sure it's not just, part of all this attention? She stared at him. Part of what? You're under a lot of pressure. The press. The scrutiny. I'm just saying, sometimes when students are in the spotlight, they perceive things more intensely. We wouldn't want it to spiral. Naima's throat burned. Would you say that if it was Braden? She asked quietly. He didn't answer. By the end of the day, she got called into the office. Again. Principal Ellison this time. Naima, I want to talk about the claims you made yesterday, she began. Hands folded on the desk like she was delivering a lecture. I didn't make claims, Naima said. I reported a concern. Well, some staff feel that your tone during the conversation was confrontational. Naima blinked. You mean when I asked why my safety wasn't taken seriously? Ellison offered the same patronizing smile Naima had seen her use on parents. We're all doing our best to make Westbridge a safe space for every student. But we also need to make sure we're not creating unnecessary fear. Sometimes when students feel threatened, they can become defensive or appear aggressive. There it was. The word, aggressive. A word dressed up as professionalism. A word used to justify ignoring her. A word designed to turn her from victim into threat. Naima stared at her. You think I'm aggressive because I'm not silent. I think we all need to use language that helps de-escalate. Ellison said. That night, Naima didn't go straight home after school. She walked the same route, past the tennis courts, down the hill, around the science wing. This time she stopped halfway and ducked behind the bushes near the faculty lot. She waited. At 3:54 p.m., footsteps approached. Naima crouched lower. The person came into view. Tall, dark coat, sunglasses, not a student, not faculty. Moving slow like someone with purpose but no urgency. Naima's breath caught. She stepped out. Hey, she called. The figure froze, then turned.
Not a student. An adult.
Male. White. Late 30s. He didn't run, just stared. Naima raised her phone and snapped a photo. Who are you? She asked. The man didn't speak. She stepped forward. Why are you following me?
A pause.
Then calmly, he said. You've made some powerful people very nervous. And walked away. Naima stood frozen. The next morning, her phone buzzed. A message. From a blocked number. Careful who you talk to. Not everyone wants the truth out. That afternoon, Simone Brooks canceled their interview. Not because she backed out, but because someone had sent her a warning too. And she wasn't the only one. The message had been short. Plain. No emojis. No name.
I have footage. Real footage. Meet me tomorrow after school.
Naima stared at it. The entire evening. Screen glowing in the dark, as the hum of her mother typing emails filled the kitchen. Renee Carter had wanted to report the message immediately. If they're serious, she warned, they'll identify themselves. This could be bait. But Naima felt something different. The tone wasn't hostile. It wasn't taunting. It read like a hand reaching through smoke, hesitant, but real. By the next day, the weight of that text followed her everywhere. Her mind wasn't in classes, not even when teachers asked her to read aloud. or join small groups. She barely noticed the extra stares, the fake concern, or the continued silence from administration. She walked through the last bell like she was moving underwater, barely hearing the clang of lockers or the shuffle of students rushing toward the exits. At 3:38 p.m. she was behind the auditorium, where the trees arched like bent guards, where a rusted bike rack and patchy gravel offered privacy. She waited. The air was still. 15 minutes passed. Then, finally, a voice behind her. Naima. She turned. It was Elijah Reyes. Of all the faces she expected, his wasn't one of them. Elijah sat in the back row of most of their classes. Quiet, distant, always with earbuds in, the kind of kid teachers forgot to call on. Biracial, light-skinned, curly hair often tucked under a hoodie. Elijah had the kind of presence that blurred into walls. No one remembered him. No one asked him anything. Elijah? She said, surprised. He nodded, glancing around nervously. I didn't want to send the message from my real account. Her guard was up instantly. Why me? He looked down. Because I saw it, and I've been quiet too long. He pulled out his phone, swiped to a file. Naima tensed. What is it? It's from the locker room security footage. Elijah said. My cousin works maintenance. I've helped him during after-school hours before. He taught me how the system works, how the feeds back up. She squinted. You hacked into the school's system? Not hacked, he said quickly. Just accessed it. I didn't delete anything. I didn't change anything. Naima hesitated. And you're giving this to me because… Elijah's eyes finally lifted to meet hers. Because I know what it feels like to be erased. A silence between them stretched. He tapped play. The footage rolled. It showed Braden in the boys' locker room, sitting on a bench, phone in hand. Another student entered, one of his teammates grinning. Braden looked up. She's baiting, he said on camera. All I have to do is nudge her, and she'll freak. You sure? The other boy said, laughing. Braden smirked. They always do. My dad said just keep pressure on. Eventually she'll swing, then they'll finally get rid of her. The rest of the clip showed him planning, laughing, dropping Naima's name, imitating her voice in mocking tones. Naima stood frozen. Her heart didn't race. It dropped. And the teacher? She asked. Elijah nodded. That's in here too. He played another clip. This one from the faculty break room. The same teacher who'd walked by during the hallway shove was speaking to another staff member. She'll blow it eventually, he said, sipping coffee. They always do. Braden's walking the line, but he knows what he's doing. The other teacher replied. You think the administration will cover it? Of course, he answered. The Carter girl's expendable. Tucker money isn't. Naima's mouth went dry. Expendable. The word felt heavier than anything Braden had ever said to her. Elijah, she whispered, why didn't you come forward sooner? He sighed. Because it was easier not to. Because when you're mixed like me, no one ever lets you forget you're too white for one side, too brown for the other. So you stay in the middle. You don't take sides. You don't speak. But you are now. Yeah, he said, more to himself than to her. I think it's time I picked a side. Naima looked at him, seeing him clearly for the first time. He handed her a USB. Everything's on this. Videos, timestamps, audio, unedited. She took it, her fingers brushing his. You're sure? He nodded. You don't owe me anything. Just make sure they can't bury it. For the first time in days, Naima felt something shift in her chest. Not relief, not joy, but momentum. They'll come after you for this, she warned. I know, he said. But I'd rather be targeted for doing the right thing than ignored for doing nothing. They parted in silence. But as Naima walked away, something in the sky felt different. Like clouds pulling back, like truth preparing to fight for breath. That night, she sat with her mother at the kitchen table. Renee plugged in the USB and watched the footage with eyes that didn't blink once. When it ended, she sat back slowly, her fingers steepled under her chin. They knew, she whispered. They knew what he was doing, and they let it happen. Naima said nothing. We go public, Renee said, her voice firmer now. We give this to the lawyer, and then we burn their cover-ups to the ground. Naima nodded. Elijah took a risk. Then he deserves protection, Renee replied. So do you. Later that night, Naima got another message. This one wasn't anonymous. From Elijah. I think there's more. The locker room files. Some were deleted. But I know how to find backups. If I do, you're going to want to see it. It's not just about Brayden anymore. Naima stared at the message. Her breath caught. It's not just about Brayden. What else had been hidden? And how deep did this conspiracy of silence really go? The interview was gone. Naima sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the email from Simone Brooks, unable to breathe. Naima, I have to postpone. I received a warning. It wasn't from the school. It came through my private number. Someone knows I've been in contact with you. Be careful. This goes deeper than I thought. Her phone slipped from her hand. Be careful. Those words lingered like an echo that refused to fade. When she told her mother, Renee didn't flinch. She'd seen too many threats dressed as warnings before. But something in her eyes shifted. Not fear, not panic, but calculation. They're trying to intimidate you, she said. That means they're scared. Naima wanted to believe that. But it didn't explain why a journalist in New York suddenly had the same target on her back. The next morning, when Naima arrived at school, there was a new car parked near the faculty lot, dark gray. Police issue. And standing beside it, in full uniform, was a man she had never seen before. Stocky. Early 40s. Clean shave. A badge that gleamed too deliberately in the sunlight. As she walked past, his eyes followed her. Not the way a security officer scans a scene. No, he was studying her. Later that morning, during third period, Principal Ellison made an announcement over the intercom. Students, please be aware that Officer Mitch Tucker from the County Police Department will be on campus this week to assist with safety and community relations. Naima's pencil froze. Tucker. Brayden's last name. The hallway buzzed with murmurs when the announcement ended. At lunch, Tish slid into the seat beside her. You heard that right. Tell me I'm not the only one connecting dots. Naima didn't answer. She didn't have to. That afternoon, she saw him again. Officer Mitch Tucker, standing at the end of the hallway near the main exit, talking to Ellison. He smiled at her as she walked by. But the smile didn't reach his eye. It was the same smirk Brayden used to wear. Later, in the courtyard, he approached her directly. Naima Carter, right? His voice was too casual, too familiar. She nodded slowly. Yes, I'm Officer Tucker, Brayden's uncle. He let the name hang there, like bait. I'm just here to make sure things stay calm. Lot of noise lately. Hard to separate truth from gossip, you know. Naima kept her expression still. I don't gossip. He smiled. Sure you don't. But people talk. I just need to make sure you're not escalating things. It'd be a shame if all this attention turned the wrong way. Naima's breath caught. Are you threatening me? He chuckled. Of course not. Just saying sometimes young people get emotional. Start seeing danger where there isn't any. You're safe here, as long as you cooperate. He walked away before she could respond. By the end of the day, rumors swirled again. This time from teachers. Apparently the officer was helping review campus security footage. Naima didn't buy it. When she walked out to the bus stop that afternoon, his car idled at the curb. She could see his reflection in the rearview mirror, eyes fixed on her through the glass. He followed her the entire way until the bus doors closed. That night, she told her mother everything. Renee listened in silence, one hand pressed against her lips. Tucker, she repeated, her tone like iron scraping against itself. Mitch Tucker? Naima nodded. He said he's Brayden's uncle. Renee stood slowly. Of course he is. Naima frowned. You know him. Renee walked to the window, her reflection pale against the night. We've met. When? Years ago. Renee turned. Her eyes were darker now. Your father used to work with him. Before everything. Naima froze. With him? As in, Renee exhaled. Before your father was killed, he was filing a misconduct complaint against 2 county officers. One of them was Mitch Tucker. The air seemed to leave the room. Naima sat back slowly, her heart beat loud in her ears. You think this is connected? I don't think. Renee said. I know. The next day, Officer Tucker was waiting in the front office when Naima arrived. He smiled again, that same unnerving calm. Good morning, Miss Carter, he said, his tone too smooth. Mind if I have a quick chat? Naima glanced at the secretary, but she looked away. I don't have time, Naima said. Just 5 minutes, Tucker insisted. Won't take long. Ellison appeared from her office. It's fine, Naima. Officer Tucker just wants to clarify a few safety questions. Reluctantly, Naima followed him to the empty counselor's room. He closed the door. Let's talk about your father, he said immediately. Naima blinked. My father, Quincy Carter, died in a traffic stop, right? Tragic situation. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. But there's still a lot of confusion about that night. Her throat tightened. Confusion? See, your mom's version of events doesn't match the report. Neither does your father's employment record. Did he ever tell you why he left the department? Naima stared at him. What are you trying to say? I'm saying maybe your family's been stirring the pot for a long time, and maybe the world's tired of hearing it. He stepped closer. You're smart, Naima. Don't waste that. The best thing you can do is drop all this noise before it swallows you too. She met his eyes, cold, steady. You killed him, didn't you? For a split second, his face twitched. Then he smiled. Careful with those words. Accusations like that can ruin lives. His life's already ruined, she said quietly. You made sure of that. Before he could respond, the door opened. Renee stood in the doorway. Her voice was sharp, controlled. Step away from my daughter. Tucker straightened. Mrs. Carter. We're just talking. No, Renee interrupted, stepping between them. You're probing. The same way you and your department did when my husband filed his report.
The room went silent.
Students passing by the hallway could see them now. The officer, the mother, and the daughter, all frozen in a confrontation that didn't need words to explain its weight. Renee's voice trembled but didn't break. You think your badge gives you the right to intimidate children? You think I forgot the night you came to my house, told me my husband resisted? I remember your face. I remember every word. Tucker's composure cracked. You're out of line. No, Renee said, her voice rising. You were, 10 years ago, when you lied on that report, when you said he reached for something he never had. The hallway had gone quiet. Teachers had stopped moving. Students watched from doorways, phones raised. Tucker turned pale. You're making a mistake. Renee stepped closer, her eyes burning. The mistake was thinking your power made you untouchable. But you're not untouchable anymore. As the crowd outside grew, the sound of approaching sirens cut through the air. Another police car rolled into the lot, but it wasn't there to protect Officer Tucker. It was there for him. The confrontation between Renee Carter and Officer Mitch Tucker was still echoing through the walls of Westbridge Academy. Footage of the incident had exploded online. A student had captured the entire exchange on their phone. Renee's unwavering voice calling out the man who had helped erase her husband, Naima's father, from the official record. Social media picked it up like wildfire. By the end of the day, hashtags trended. Justice for Quincy Carter. She spoke back, truth at Westbridge. And yet within the school's walls, the energy grew even more hostile. Naima noticed the shift instantly. Teachers were curt, cautious. Some avoided eye contact. A few of her classmates who had once whispered their support now walked past without a glance. There was no open retaliation. Not anymore. Just quiet exclusion wrapped in civility. But Naima had reached a new place inside herself. A place past permission, past seeking approval. She wanted her strength back. So she turned to the one thing that had always reminded her who she was. Martial arts. Her father had introduced her to it when she was 6. It wasn't just about movement. It was memory, discipline, ritual. It was where she first learned control in a world built to provoke her. When she saw the flyer for the upcoming state martial arts tournament posted at the local rec center, something in her sparked. She signed up that night, not to prove anything to the school, but to remind herself that her body, her focus, her fight belonged to her. She trained after school, early mornings, late nights, in the garage, with the heavy bag, in her bedroom with old DVDs her dad left behind, his own competitions from years before. Her mother quietly unpacked his uniform one night, still folded neatly in a box labeled Quincy 2007 Finals. Naima took it with trembling hands. It still smelled like him. She didn't tell the school right away. It wasn't their business. But when the tournament date overlapped with a Westbridge prep exam, one she had already waived due to her independent study agreement, the administration stepped in. She was called into Principal Ellison's office the following Monday. We've heard you're planning to compete in an off-campus athletic event, Ellison said, tone tight. Naima nodded. It's a state-sanctioned competition. During school hours. I've submitted my academic exceptions. The exam isn't mandatory for me. Ellison folded her hands. Even so, we feel this is an unnecessary distraction, especially given the current climate. You've been in the media enough, Naima. We think stepping back would be wise. Naima's stomach clenched. Are you saying I can't compete? I'm saying if you miss the scheduled exam time, It will be marked as an unexcused absence. 3 of those as grounds for academic probation. Naima leaned forward. You're threatening me with suspension for entering a martial arts tournament? Ellison didn't blink. We're asking you to focus on your studies. I am, Naima said quietly. You just keep moving the finish line. The meeting ended without resolution. Naima walked out with shaking hands and fire in her chest. That night, she told her mother everything. Renee listened, then pulled out a folder she hadn't opened in years. Your father trained a lot of people, she said. Some of them still owe him favors. She made one call, then another. By the end of the night, someone had agreed to sponsor Naima's gear, registration, and transportation. Their name was Luis Ortega, a former student of Quincy Carter's from his NYPD training days, now retired, and watching the Westbridge headlines closely. He said your dad used to talk about you all the time, Renee said softly. He remembers when you were born. The next morning, a new uniform arrived, tailored, black with red trim, embroidered with her initials NC. Along with it came a handwritten note. This world will never stop testing you. That doesn't mean you stop showing up. Fight clean. Fight smart. Fight for more than yourself. Naima taped the note inside her locker. When she arrived at school the next day, 2 more teachers had suddenly backed out of monitoring her exam. Then came the email. Due to administrative scheduling conflicts, Naima Carter's attendance for the upcoming exam will be marked as flexible. They weren't going to say they were wrong, but they weren't going to fight her now either. Not with cameras watching. Not with more people starting to pay attention. Naima trained harder than she ever had before. On the day of the tournament, the auditorium buzzed with competitors, hundreds from across the state. Some older, some younger. Few looked like her. When she stepped onto the mat, wearing her father's legacy stitched into her sleeve, she didn't feel small. She felt ancestral. She bowed once, closed her eyes. Every breath, every stance was a conversation with ghosts. Her first round, clean. Second round, controlled. Third round, tested her. But it wasn't about the win. It was about the rhythm in her bones, the silence between the moves, the feeling of being whole in body, in memory, in fight. After her final routine, the crowd applauded. She didn't need a trophy. Her victory had already happened before she stepped onto the mat. Back at school the next week, no one spoke of the tournament. No teachers congratulated her. No bulletin boards displayed her medal. But in the parking lot, someone waited. An older man, weathered face, strong hands, Luis Ortega. He stepped out of his truck and handed her a framed photo. A younger Quincy Carter, mid-kick in the same uniform Naima now wore. He'd be proud, he said. Naima smiled, tears pricking her eyes. He already is. As they stood by the curb, Luis hesitated, then pulled an envelope from his jacket. He wanted you to have this when you were ready, he said. Your father left something behind. A letter. But it's not just for you. It's about Westbridge. The letter from Luis Ortega sat unopened on Naima's dresser for 3 days. She couldn't bring herself to read it yet. Her father's words, from beyond, carried a weight she wasn't ready to lift. It felt like opening that envelope would demand something of her. Something final. Something bigger than the fight she'd already survived. But the tournament was approaching, and the world was starting to watch. After her confrontation with the school, after standing her ground, the state martial arts championship had become something more than a competition. For Naima, it was redemption, a reclamation, a declaration that no system, no threat, no uniform could define her boundaries again. The night before the tournament, she sat on her bedroom floor, her father's framed photo beside her, Quincy Carter in his crisp white G, his stance poised, balanced, precise. Her mother sat across from her, hands folded, calm. You don't have to win, Renee said softly. I know. You just have to show them who you are. Naima nodded slowly. That's the part I've been fighting to remember. The morning of the championship, the stadium pulsed with energy, the low buzz of sneakers scuffing polished floors, the scent of chalk and sweat, the echo of announcements bouncing off the high rafters. Hundreds of spectators filled the stands. Cameras circled. A regional network was broadcasting the event live. State Finals Youth Division. Naima Carter wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't on anyone's watch list. Her name didn't make the pre-event predictions. But word had spread online. The black girl from Westbridge, the one who taught herself, the one who'd taken on her school, and the system behind it. Some people came to cheer, Some came out of curiosity, and others came to see if she'd fail. Luis Ortega was there, waiting near the corner of the mat, his eyes steady beneath a worn cap. He didn't say much, just handed her a small wrist wrap with 3 faded initials stitched into it. Her father, Naima, wrapped it tight around her wrist, feeling his presence steady her pulse. The preliminaries passed in a blur of movement and breath. Every kata, every pivot, every extension of her arm felt like a conversation between past and present. Her competitors were skilled, some better trained, some older, most coached by seasoned professionals. But Naima had something none of them did: pain that had purpose. By the time she reached the final round, her heart was calm. The announcer's voice boomed over the speakers. And now for the gold. In Division 3, we have Naima Carter versus Madison Hale. The crowd roared. Madison, a national favorite, sponsored, trained, featured on glossy posters, blonde hair pulled tight, stance immaculate, confidence sharp enough to cut glass. Naima bowed. Madison nodded curtly. The referee signaled. What followed wasn't a fight, it was a dialogue in motion. Naima's movements were precise, controlled, graceful. Every block, every counter flowed like water meeting stone. Madison struck hard, fast, efficient, but Naima didn't fight back with anger. She redirected, absorbed, released. Every motion told a story: of the hallway humiliation, the coffee spilling down her shirt, the silence from her teachers, the fear that tried to shrink her. The crowd grew silent. Her final sequence was flawless, a blend of tradition and innovation, balance and emotion. When the match ended, she didn't cheer. She simply bowed, eyes closed, chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. The judges conferred. When they raised the scorecards, the numbers spoke for themselves. 9-9, 10. The crowd erupted. Naima had won. But it wasn't the gold medal that mattered. It was the moment. The footage of her final routine spread online before she even left the mat. By evening, her face was everywhere. Clips captioned, "Grace under fire." The girl they tried to silence. She didn't just win, she reclaimed. Millions watched her kneel at the end of her performance, whisper something to the sky, and touch her wrist where her father's initials gleamed under the light. Luis stood by the exit, pride shining through the quiet. "You reminded them who your father was," he said, "and who you are." Naima smiled faintly. "I didn't fight them," she said. "I just didn't let them win." That night, the city felt different. Strangers reached out online. Parents emailed the news networks. Even students from other schools sent messages saying her story made them believe they could speak up too. But back at Westbridge, the silence was heavier than ever. The administration didn't mention her win in the morning announcements. There was no congratulatory email. The teachers who once dismissed her avoided her eyes completely now. When she walked through the hall, students parted, not out of respect but out of uncertainty. And waiting by her locker that afternoon was Braden Tucker. He hadn't been seen in weeks. His hair was shorter, his face tenser. There was no arrogance this time, just something colder, more deliberate.
Naima froze.
"Congratulations," he said quietly. "You're famous now." She didn't answer. Braden took a step closer. "You think all this changes anything? You embarrassed my family. You made my uncle lose his badge. You think that's the end of it?" Naima kept her gaze level. "You did that yourselves." He smirked. "You think people like me ever lose for long?" She could smell the bitterness on him, the privilege unraveling. "Stay away from me," she said firmly. He leaned in. "I tried to, but you don't stop, do you?" When she stepped back, he moved closer again, not shouting, not violent, just hovering, using presence like a weapon. A teacher walked by, glanced, then kept going. Braden smiled faintly. "See? Even now no one's going to stop me." Naima felt the world narrow around her. The hallway, the light, the distance, all collapsing into one small, suffocating space. He brushed past her shoulder deliberately, hard enough to knock her books loose. She didn't move, didn't flinch, but her heart pounded with something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not fear, not rage, but anticipation. Something was coming. And this time it wasn't just words. That night, as Naima packed her gym bag, she noticed something wedged beneath her front door. A torn piece of her father's letter, written in his unmistakable hand. "If you're reading this, it means they've found you." It was a Friday. The halls buzzed with the usual pre-weekend chaos, slamming lockers, shouted plans, the scraping of chairs against tiled floors. But beneath it all, there was a nervous hum, something Naima had learned to recognize. A silence wrapped in noise, the kind of tension that signaled a storm. Her name had been everywhere since the championship. Clips from the final match aired on local and national news. Commentators called her a modern symbol of resilience, while others debated whether she was being overglorified. Some painted her as a victim turned hero, others a threat cloaked in calm. But inside Westbridge, the lines were sharper. Teachers said little, students said less, and Braden Tucker had returned, not suspended, not reprimanded, just reappeared, like he had always been there. The administration claimed he'd been receiving counseling. But Naima knew better. His father was still on the board. His uncle might have lost his badge, but the Tucker name hadn't lost its reach. That morning, Naima received an anonymous message. Again. Printed and shoved through the vent in her locker. Last warning. Silence is safer. The next one won't miss. She didn't show it to anyone. Didn't cry. Didn't panic. She folded it slowly, placed it in her notebook, and kept moving. Third period passed. Then fourth. At the end of the hallway, near the side staircase rarely used since the second-floor wing had closed for renovations, someone had left her notebook on the floor. Open. Pages bent like someone had stomped on them. She picked it up confused. Then she heard it. Footsteps behind her. Turning around, she saw him.
Braden.
His face was pale. Calm. Too calm. No one else was around. The bell hadn't rung yet. The cameras near the ceiling blinked red. Recording. He stepped forward. You think you've won, he said quietly. But you don't even know the game. Naima stayed silent. You turned my uncle into a headline, he continued. You turned me into a monster. She didn't move. I used to be untouchable here. You changed that. He stepped closer. I could end it all right now, he whispered. One push. One bruise. You'd be gone. Naima's heart pounded. Not from fear, but from restraint. She could end this too. 6 seconds, her father had once told her. That's all it would take. But she remembered what he'd taught her. Over and over. Control is the most dangerous form of power. She straightened her back. I'm not afraid of you, she said. Braden smiled. You should be. He shoved her hard. Her back slammed against the lockers, the metal clanging in protest. Her books scattered to the floor. She didn't fall. He came forward again, fist raised. Naima stared at him. She could block. She could strike. She could leave him on the floor. But that would be his win. So she did something he didn't expect. She dropped her hands to her side and whispered, Go ahead. Braden blinked. What? Hit me. In front of the cameras. In front of every person who's been watching this school. He hesitated. Hit me, she repeated. Make it easy for the world to see exactly who you are. His hand trembled. Then lowered. You're not worth it, he spat. He turned to leave. Behind them, the hallway camera above the lockers continued blinking. A silent witness. What he didn't know was that the school's IT system had recently been updated. And that camera? It wasn't just recording. It was streaming live, part of a new campus transparency policy initiated after the district's last public relations crisis. That footage was being archived to a central cloud. And someone, a student in the tech club, already a quiet ally of Naima's, had flagged it. By the time Naima picked up her books and walked to class, the footage was already making its way online. Braden, threatening. Naima, standing still. Braden, shoving her. Naima, choosing peace. No strikes, no retaliation, just proof. Proof of who he was, and who she chose to be. That night, a national outlet reached out for an exclusive, not about the fight, but about the letter Naima's father had left behind. Because someone else had seen it, and they were ready to The video of Braden's final ambush traveled faster than even Naima's championship clip. There was no debating the footage this time. No spinning the narrative. No editing out the truth. It was all there. Braden's threats, his aggression, Naima's restraint, and the moment she chose peace instead of power. The internet erupted. Thousands of viewers shared the clip with captions like, "This is what Grace looks like under pressure," and they tried to push her to snap. She chose dignity. The school tried silence first, then excuses, then damage control, but none of it could erase the fact that the entire nation had now seen what had been happening behind closed doors at Westbridge Academy. Petitions launched, hashtags trended again, civil rights organizations stepped in. By the end of the week, 3 teachers had resigned. The school board held an emergency meeting, and Principal Ellison was placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into systemic discrimination. But Naima wasn't waiting for apologies. She was moving. Lawyers from advocacy nonprofits reached out. Offers came in. Interviews, speaking events, scholarship conversations. Ivy League schools extended private invites, some even offering full ride packages. Naima turned down the first 4. Not because she wasn't honored, but because something felt unfinished. One afternoon, she opened the envelope Luis Ortega had given her father's final letter. It was handwritten. Naima, if you're reading this, it means they've found you. Not just the ones who feared me, but the ones who need you. There are people out there who will try to silence you, not because you're wrong, but because you're too powerful when you speak. They will try to twist your peace into provocation, your questions into rebellion. But know this, every voice that refuses to whisper gives another the courage to speak. You don't have to fight their way. You don't even have to win their games. Just keep showing up. That's the fight. I love you always.
Dad.
She wept reading it. Then she began writing. With her mother's help, she built a resource site for students across the country, experiencing racial bias in school systems. She called it Unmuted. It allowed students to submit anonymous incidents, find legal help, and connect with mental health counselors. Donations poured in. Her story was more than viral now. It was movement. At graduation, she was chosen as the student speaker. Some protested the decision, others said it was political. But when Naima stood at the podium, there was silence. She looked out over the rows of caps and gowns, teachers, parents, journalists tucked quietly in the back. She didn't read from her notes. She spoke plainly. They tried to break me, but they didn't know who raised me. They wanted me small, scared, and silent. But silence never kept anyone safe. To every student who was ever told they were too much, too angry, too loud, too difficult, I hope you never stop being any of those things. Because the world doesn't change for the quiet. It changes for the brave. She paused. Then asked one question that no one forgot. If I hadn't filmed it, would you have believed me? The auditorium went still. Some teachers lowered their eyes. A few parents wiped tears. And a movement that had started with a cup of spilled coffee had now turned into a challenge, echoing across the country. Some stories aren't just stories, they're warnings. They show us what silence protects and what courage costs. If this hit you deep, if it made you think of someone who deserved better, type yes. If you believe in justice, and subscribe if this broke your heart.